role models are so important. Although real role models are sometimes problematic. Have you ever met like a real, like, iconic role model? I had the honor of meeting one of mine. She was like a feminist role model, an artist and an activist, and she had an actual vision of creating an island of all women. Like Wonder Woman's Paradise Island, where women would be away. She had done so much war-torn work, you know, in Africa with in the different women who've been brutalized and the chaos of war, that she decided the way to solve this, to heal these women, is to create a safe haven where they could actualize and get empowered, and that it would be staffed only by women from all over the world on a private island. No men allowed. When we think of an island of all men, we don't think health and healing, we think Rikers. We do. We think Alcatraz. We don't think, empowerment. We think Lord of the Flies. The night that I met her, I felt like by this point in my life that I had just conjured this experience out of hard work and sheer will. I had just gotten back from Europe from touring with us, one of my one-woman shows, and at this point, with the help of my comedy troupe, Planet Girl, I was no longer at risk of being a, you know, naked lesbian vampire. I was now like an artist with a platform to say stuff that I was proud of. And I actually had a Broadway producer talking about taking my show to New York, and it was he who introduced me to the role model. He was, whose name I'm not going to tell you because it really goes poorly. Anyhow, spoiler. So he was like, you know, you two are soulmates. You gosh, I mean, she needs to meet you, and he'd been invited to a dinner in her honor, and should I come? And it's, God, what I thought I would do to have a woman like this as a mentor. I mean, granted, at this point I was 37 and a bit long in the tooth for the title of protege, but it's just one of my pet peeves for years have been like, all my guy friends had mentors, like a college professor or somebody who met them when they were young was like, kid, I like your style, I'm going to show you the ropes, and then we're going to go to a bar and hit on hot chicks, you know? And in female culture, I just didn't really find this. Like, most of the potential mentors I had were always men, and sexual tension always somehow managed to ruin it. So I knew what I needed was a female mentor, a straight female mentor, who would take me under her maternal wing and say, you know, you and I'm going to show you the ropes, and then we're going to go to a bar and hit on hot guys. And that was my dream when I met her. I figured I would tell her about Planet Girl and our signature performance piece, which was a song called Vagina Dentata, where we were wearing foam rubber vaginas with teeth and saying, how could something so delicious turn out to be so vicious? Vagina. It was, you get everyone, it was awesome. Anyhow, I figured she would hear this and be like, oh my goodness, that is genius. I'm going to have to book you girls to perform in the next big issue women's thingy or something. So I did dress to impress her. I called all the Planet Girl girls, and my mother took me shopping. I mean, especially in the 90s, you know, body image was the big thing, and she was on this bandwagon. So I knew it needed to be confident and sexy, but classy. And I ended up in like, it was a black velvet dress to here with boots and dark stockings. And we get there, and there's only about 10 of us. It's all like wealthy philanthropists and friends of the arts. And my friend, the Broadway producer, is like, oh, this is Cyndi, and she's producing Feminist Theater here in Boston. You have a lot in common. And we're talking about taking her show to New York. And she's like, oh, well, that's good for you. Well, but best of luck with that. And so she goes on. She starts talking about funding of her projects. And I got to say, it is so refreshing for me to hear that somebody with a career as hot as hers has the same issue I have, which is funding the arts. So I started joining the conversation from the perspective of emerging artists, and she's like, oh, and what do you want out of life? You want to be famous like me? And everybody at the table's staring, and I'm like, no, I just want to be at a point where I don't have to, you know, work 4 sucky day jobs in order to produce a show. And she says, because you don't know when I was happiest? Sweetheart, I was happiest when nobody knew who I was. When I had a teaching job at NYU and I could sit at a coffee shop and nobody would bother me. And I'm thinking, you know, a teaching job at NYU would certainly be cushier than, you know, cocktail waitressing at the rack billiards hall. The joke was you had to have a rack in order to work at the rack. She says, you know what your problem is, sweetheart? And I'm like, no. I mean, up to then I thought the problem was I didn't have a mentor. The problem is you need to learn patience. Do you know how many years of hard work it took me to get where I am? Do you have any idea how many, and how old are you anyhow? And I didn't know why that mattered. I said 37, and she shut up. Clearly, she thought she was berating somebody far younger. But then I started realizing, wait a minute, I've actually read articles that she has written on girl power and empowering young women and not shaming young women for sounding smart. And as I'm reeling in my confusion, she launches off on the island of all women, an island where there'll be nurturing and kindness, and I'm just like wondering, and who's going to be on that island to protect the women from you? I took a cab ride home. The cab driver, he was this guy, he's like in his late 50s, and a little bit of gray hair, West Indian accent, I think. He's like, so, where do you come from all dressed up on a Tuesday night, pretty lady? And I told him, oh my God, I have been to the most annoying dinner of my life. And he goes, hi, you tell me. And so I started telling him, and he, like, listened. Like, he started asking questions, and he made jokes. What's wrong with your friend? What kind of friend you have? Your friend not defend you. And I'm like, you're right. If only you had been there. By the time I got home, I felt much better. And I think the night was far from a total loss because, you know, the whole point is that I wanted to, like, make a connection, and I did with the cab driver. I realized by the end of the night that, like, maybe my desire for a role model or a mentor at this point in my life was naive, an old dream from my younger self that it was time that I give up on. Or as the cab driver said, hey, you wanted my advice? You grown lady, you don't need advice. You give yourself advice. Which is, you know, pretty good advice. I decided if I really want a role model, I'm better off with a fictitious one. Because real role models are people, and people can disappoint you. And fictitious role models live in your brain. And they show up whenever you need them. And they always know exactly what you need to hear. I told him all about the island of all women. He said, ha! That would never work. The island of all women is the island that all the men would swim to.